I'm Dr. Ziggy. I'm head of R&D at the Australian Institute of Advanced Technologies. I have a PhD in AI, a master's in philosophy, and a master's in theology. And behind the camera, once again, my brand manager, Matt, who'll be joining me today for this video. Now, Matt doesn't know what we're going to be talking about. I want to try something different. I want to do a book review. Now, recently I read a book about Nvidia. This was published in December 2024, very, very fresh. Now, Matt doesn't have a technical background. He's like a completely different perspective on all of these things, which is great to have him on this channel for that particular reason. Now, when I say Nvidia, Matt, what comes to mind?
Brings me back to my teenage years of trying to keep up with PC games and having to buy new expensive Nvidia cards for it to go completely obsolete 6 months later and not be able to play the newest titles.
Yes.
It was a nightmare.
Believe it or not, that's something that I'm going to cover about this book. Okay, so the book that I want to discuss, review, is called The Nvidia Way, Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of Nvidia, and the Making of a Tech Giant by Tae Kim. The TLDR synopsis is 3 stars out of 5. The good stuff, nostalgia, and just learning about how a company went from nothing to a giant of the IT industry was fascinating to read. However, the glorification of the corporate culture and the style of the author, that jarred me, and I'll get into the details right now. So firstly, the good stuff. I'm a 90s kid as well, and growing up in that race for the best PCs, you know, it was bragging rights, right? Like, who had the best video cards, who had the best PC. I remember when I bought a Pentium 133 with 2.5 gigabytes of hard disk space. At the time, the kids were like, man, what are you gonna do with so much space and so much power? And this one time I bought a video card that had 2 megabytes of memory, and the guy at the shop was like, wow, I've never seen so much. I can't believe you ordered this into my shop. And you know, so the book itself, when it explains how Nvidia started, 3 guys got together, 3 very clever, very brilliant people got together. They met frequently at Denny's, but seeing them sort of come together and then bring this company to life, and reading about all the trials that they had to go through, right? How it was a cutthroat industry as it is today, and all the tribulations that they went through. I mean, their first 2 chips were flops. How did they solve it? How did they get the money? Like, they first had investors coming in. Like, no one's going to put money into it. So how did they solve it? One interesting anecdote that was mentioned was the first or their second chip was superior to all chips on the market. Unfortunately, no one bought the chips, and the reason why no one bought the chips was that it wasn't compatible with the latest craze, which was Doom. So nobody cared, right? Nobody cared. So they realized that they had to sort of merge their ideas into the current market and then expand on that. And then, you know, all the stuff about CUDA and how they brought CUDA into the fore, and then now CUDA is a programming language for GPUs. They invented the term GPU and how that came about. The initial cards that were branded GPUs weren't strictly GPUs, but they had the GPU in mind. So, you know, seeing that historical progression from the 90s all the way up to the end of 2024, funnily enough, the DeepSeek saga was not mentioned because it has just happened. What Matt mentioned, the nostalgia aspect, and seeing how 3 brilliant people maneuvered through a cutthroat industry was a fascinating thing to read. Now, the 2 downsides. I want to put the 2 downsides into one. Glorification of corporate culture. And culture here is a misnomer, a significant misnomer. One of the reasons why I went back into academia, because I was tired of corporate culture. It's disgusting in a lot of ways. Let me quote you a few things from this book. This is from chapter 6. Fear and anxiety became Jensen's favorite motivational tools. Yeah, right. It's a lot of this culture is about controlling your workers. Now, control is a very, very strong word, but like this author was writing, Jensen used fear and anxiety to maybe not control, but keep everyone at attention. And the way that he describes this is a culture that is, in my very strong opinion, unhealthy. It's a little bit Machiavellian, right? Machiavelli, in his famous book, The Prince, asked the question, is it better to lead through love or through fear? And then he discusses, well, love is good, but fear is better, because fear allows you more control of your underlings. So, as this book says, fear and anxiety became Jensen's favorite motivational tools. That triggered me, because I used to work in the IT industry, and I left that industry because of this corporate culture. Let me read you another few sentences here. This is from chapter 16. Nvidia demands much of its people. Extreme commitment is critical to the Nvidia way. 60-hour work weeks are expected as the bare minimum, even at junior positions. A work week can stretch to 80 hours or more during critical periods in chip development. Now, this is not good, right? The way that the author frames it and the way that he says it, he sometimes frowns at this kind of culture, to use the misnomer again. However, we should be much more critical of this entire idea of 60-hour work weeks, 80-hour work weeks. I mean, what's the final goal here, and at what cost are we achieving this final goal? Obviously, it's profit, but at what cost? People are going to be unhealthy in this working environment. Families are going to suffer. Marriages are going to break down. It's inevitable, and kids are going to get hurt in this as well. How do you quantify that? You can't really quantify hurt. These things are immaterial. So yes, Nvidia have been extremely successful, but at what cost? So I took off 2 stars. 1 star for this particular glorification of this kind of corporate culture. I think we aren't critical enough of this. And the other thing I took off a star was just the style of the author. And if you're an outsider to the IT industry, you won't find this book interesting. But it should be interesting to you, because this is one of the biggest companies in the world at the moment, and a historical analysis of how this company came to be should be interesting to anybody. And I've read books that have been outside of my area of expertise, or outside of my area of interest, and the author made the topic very interesting for me, just this psychological analyses and analyses in general. So I took a star for that. That's my analysis. Matt, do you have anything you want to comment on that? Anything that comes to mind?
When you spoke about the cutthroat nature of the corporate culture, can you give us an example from your experience that kind of would tie into what you were pulling from this book?
Yeah, look, that's dark. That's really, really dark. I've seen some pretty bad things happen in the corporate culture. Yeah, I know of a company that pushed someone to work longer hours so that their marriage would break down, so that they would then become depressed and work even longer hours and devote their life to the company. That's evil, right? That's evil.
I think it's important for us, because we know about our Sam Altmans, we know about our Elon Musks, but we don't know about what goes into propping these people up to their status. And behind every one of these geniuses, there's like 500,000 people often who are suffering and who are being stood on to make these developments.
Yeah. The other flip side of the coin is that everyone there is there of their own volition, right? Like 60-hour work week, 80-hour work weeks. You don't have to work for that company. So they choose to work there. However, the fact that is not criticized, and the fact that that is glorified in some way as like, this is what you have to do to be successful, that to me is an indication of something broken in society, that we have mixed up the hierarchy of values where profit is put ahead of a healthy family life, healthy kids, healthy, and yes, they are free to leave, they are free to work there, but this shouldn't be held up as something that is positive or an option in today's society. I've seen a lot in the IT industry. I've seen lots of backstabbing. I mean, there's good out there. Don't get me wrong. And Matt's asked a pretty dark question, but I've seen backstabbings. I've seen people trying to control through manipulation. I've seen people being, people prodding other people for weaknesses in their psyche, in their psychology, and these weaknesses being exploited. And on the outside, I mean, you can't really pin anyone for doing this, because if you were to take a transcript of conversations, you can interpret manipulation from various angles, various degrees, and when you're there in the moment, you're in the room, you can see what's happening, you can feel what's happening, you can read people's body language, you can read their, the way that they're saying these things, or what they really mean through these words that they're uttering. It's a completely different world out there. So I got out of that world. I didn't want to be a part of it. The IT industry, there's a lot of money there, and it attracts a lot of nasty people. Just didn't want to be a part of it. So I went into academia, which has its own issues. Maybe that's something for another time. Anyway, would you read a book like that, Matt, about Nvidia's history, or not?
I probably would, actually. I'm quite interested in the history of companies, especially companies that make obscure things. Like Nintendo used to make cards, playing cards for ages. Those kind of things do fascinate me, especially when it's like a large, huge behemoth of a company that had humble beginnings. I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah, a book on Nintendo would be fascinating, wouldn't it? I mean, I grew up with Nintendo as well, and the games that they made, like what was the creative spirit like in the company? How have they managed to stay so successful and to keep creating beautiful games throughout these decades? I mean, we've seen so many companies like Ubisoft and Bethesda and all that, they've just gone rotten to the core. I mean, that corporate culture is gonna rot from the inside sooner or later. That this desire for this desire for profits, right? But Nintendo somehow is managing to keep creating quality content. Yeah. All right. Well, that's my lengthy and short and lengthy review of The Nvidia Way by Jensen Huang and the making of a tech giant. 3 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching.